Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to MIT Social Entrepreneurship Alumni Group Entrepreneur Track webinar. This is the third in our series of 4 webinars for entrepreneurs. We also have another track, which is the investor track. Today, the title of our webinar is ABC of Fundraising. And I am very pleased to have 2 amazing social entrepreneurs with us to talk about this topic. That's going to be Kwame and Carl, and you will meet them shortly. So before we start, let me just review what the SEAG missions are. So we are organized under MIT Alumni Association, and what we would like to do is to build a community around MIT affiliates and friends that promotes and supports social entrepreneurship and impact investing to build a better world. We also collaborate with other like-minded organizations. As I said, we have 2 tracks this year. One is investor track and the other is entrepreneurship track. And I want to highlight that you should absolutely make sure to catch the May session, which is going to be a master class in negotiating terms. This will be presented by a social entrepreneur who was also an attorney who is used to write term sheets for investors. So he is going to be fantastic in terms of going through what are the major terms and issues that you want to consider. The other webinar that I would encourage everybody to register for is Effective Mentoring, which is co-sponsored with MIT Solve and Miller Center GSBI program. Both Carl and Kwame were my mentees through the MIT D-Lab Scale Up program, and it's a really good way to get advice and very rewarding for the mentor. So again, I would encourage you to sign up for that and learn about how to have the most effective relationship with mentors and mentees. A quick slide on how you can be engaged with us. There are 2 ways to connect with us. If you are an MIT alum or an affiliate, you can join our group through the Infinite Connection. And if you are that or someone that does not have a login to MIT system, you can also join us through the LinkedIn group that we have set up. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. So with that, I would like to turn over to Kwame, who is CEO of Moringa Connect and one of my most favorite social entrepreneurs. So here's Kwame.
Hey, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And Sayuri and everyone with the MIT Alumni Group, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share largely my lessons learned / failures on the fundraising journey. I'm excited to dive right in. I'm going to screen share to get us started, and we can take it from there. Yep.
There's something that I forgot to mention, so let me just interrupt for a sec.
Absolutely.
For those that are watching, if you have a question, there is a Q&A button, so you can use that to type in your questions live. We are not going to answer those questions until both Carl and Kwame are done. So we'll hold the question until the end, but you can type it in as we go along and we'll get to it. Thanks. Kwame, go ahead.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And so I'm going to dive us right in. Before we get to the ABCs of fundraising, I'll give you a little bit of context about sort of my personal journey in Moringa Connect and how that journey has ultimately taught me a lot of what not to do when raising capital. So at Moringa Connect, as Siri has mentioned, we are actually an MIT Harvard spinout right out of the MIT D-Lab Scale-Ups program. And our mission is to improve lives from our farmers all the way to our consumers through the Moringa tree. And my personal story actually starts in Ghana. So on the left is my cute phase. And growing up in Ghana, all I wanted to do was fly. I wanted to build things that flew, and I broke apart everyone's toys, just excited about engineering. And I was really blessed and fortunate to get the chance to immigrate to the US with my immediate family and get exposure to robotics in high school, and by college had set sights on MIT studying aerospace engineering, really as part of just this American dream. So the picture on the right is really the pinnacle of me sort of living out that dream, at least in my mind, as an intern at the Kennedy Space Flight Center through the MIT Aerospace Engineering department. And I thought that was gonna be the rest of my future until, as the picture shows, there are some specific events that challenged me to reconsider what I wanted to do in life. I got the chance to travel to Ghana in 2010. This is now 10 years since I came to the US. And on that trip was just exposed to rural poverty for the first time as part of a Christian service mission trip to the northern part of Ghana. And this, that trip basically challenged me to start thinking, okay, if aerospace engineers can help put a man on the moon, then what can I start doing to leverage everything I've been blessed with to put more food on the table for farming families that I got to meet and live with, to create more opportunities for their families as a whole. And that sort of destabilization of what I wanted to do ultimately led me to D-Lab, which is a program here at MIT that says, how do we all come together and co-create solutions together with people in the developing world? And as part of my class project, I was introduced to the Moringa tree. So that's the tree, that's me climbing it on the right. And I basically got to learn so much from working with farmers and doing life with farmers in Ghana. So we fast forward to January 2012, I get the chance to travel to Ghana with Amy Smith, the founder of D-Lab, as well as my co-founder, Emily Cunningham in Moringa Connect. And we met farmers like Akosia Krab, who just shared how excited they were when aid organizations brought Moringa to their communities. They said, hey, gram for gram, these leaves can contain more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk, more protein than yogurt. The seeds of the tree contain this incredible cosmetic oil. And the sad reality was, after all these trees were planted, there was no market created for farmers like Akosia. And so at the end of the day, I met a jaded Akosia, not the vibrant, excited Akosia we see pictured here. And fundamentally, we realized that there was a disconnect in the Moringa market. And so we called our company, Moringa Connect. I apologize in advance that it sounds like a dating website. I'm really sorry, but we tried. And so the goal is really just to connect the dots between farmers like Akosia with Moringa in her rural community, all the way to global consumers who are looking for Moringa-powered food and beauty products. And over the past 5 years of operating on the ground in Ghana and here in the US, we've built really the first vertically integrated supply chain for Moringa out of Ghana. So we start by giving farmers the inputs they need to cultivate Moringa at scale. We serve them with guaranteed market, financial literacy, nutrition workshops. Second piece of our model is really adding value in Ghana. So we make sure that moringa is not like other value chains that have largely been exported from Ghana with zero value addition. So we transform the seeds into a cold pressed moisturizing cosmetic oil in Ghana. And as well, we transform the leaves from the tree into a nutritious leaf powder. And then last leg of our vertically integrated process is really connecting this directly to consumers. So we do this through partnerships with other brands where we're selling our moringa as an ingredient into their food and beauty products. And then as well, we've created our own sort of in-house brands, championing moringa as a hero ingredient in beauty called True Moringa. And then our food and nutrition brand called Minga Foods. And our brand True Moringa, sort of the power behind it and the excitement behind what we've created is saying we're just harnessing all the natural goodness in moringa. It contains an incredible plant hormone called zeaxanthin that's amazing anti-aging benefits. It's non-comedogenic, it's long-lasting moisture, it doesn't leave you feeling greasy. So if you're excited and want to explore, feel free to check out our website, truemoringa.com. And then the second brand that we have, this is actually just exclusively in Ghana for now. We're just saying, let's take all the natural goodness in the moringa leaves this time. So the iron, the calcium, the vitamins, and let's put it into teas and energy bars that make enjoying moringa fun and tasty. Having said all of this, I'll wrap up by just kind of talking about where we're at to date. So we're super fortunate to build bulk ingredient partnerships with a number of fast growing brands in North America and in Asia. And then we're really excited to have ended 2019 with actually getting on the store shelves of Whole Foods in New England. So everyone in New England who's listening, check out your nearest Whole Foods to enjoy our True Moringa oil serums, hair and face and body products. And as well, you can find them online. And really, we're just excited to be the first moringa powered beauty brand on the store shelves of all these retailers. And excited to connect, this class project out of MIT through scale ups from rural communities in Ghana all the way to you and I as global consumers here in North America. And in terms of milestones, since 2014, our first year of operations, we've been able to help 5,000 farming families move from planting individual moringa trees in their backyards or front yards into actual full-scale, acre-scale cultivations of moringa. Secondly, we've created 150 jobs along our supply chain, largely for women and youth, and excited to see them get involved in the agro-processing value chain. Through these, through both our job creation and our farmer engagement, we are impacting about 25,000 lives through our model. And then fourth, we've been super, super excited and fortunate to have crossed the 2 million trees planted mark, being one of the biggest afforesting organizations in Ghana. And then fifth, and what we're really here to talk about, we've been also blessed and fortunate to raise over $4.5 million through a series of different types of capital. And I think with that, I'll transition into sort of just my quick take on the ABCs of fundraising. So the A for me, I think I love alliteration, so this is super corny and I apologize in advance. But to me, the A is saying, how do we attract investors? The B is how do we build both our internal capacity and external facing documents to really package the investment opportunity. And then the C, how do we close each of the key steps in the fundraising process so it ends with dollars in the bank account. I'll dive into each section and just share sort of my high-level lessons learned and key takeaways. And if at any point anyone has a question or wants to slide, I'm gladly share anything that I have here. So first, under attract, I think it's super, super important to talk to other founders in trying to build a Rolodex of investors that you can connect with. And so for me, the things that have been most useful have been talking to founders, talking to other investors, looking at conference attendance lists, and researching people and their organizations from that. Also participating in accelerators like GSBI, like Scale Ups, and fellowships like Echo and Green to get access ultimately to a larger database of potential investors. I think I'm really bad at this, but it's more and more, it really helps to create a public profile and to be sharing content on that, on those profiles so that you're maximizing the number of eyeballs. And then I think the last bullet I have on the research is getting out there to meet people in person, because you accomplish so much more in person than at networking events than via email and stalking people online. The next piece of attracting beyond research is to actually now consolidate the research. And I've put here sort of my top bullet points for the key things to leave every in-depth investor conversation with. So I would realize that I'll meet someone, I'll get really excited, but at the end of the day, because I didn't ask the right questions early, we would develop a relationship, and at the end of the day, there was just a misalignment. So I would always, and moving forward, try to really strive to ask any new investor, like, what type of investor are they? Are they an individual? Are they from a fund? Are they looking to PRI type investments? Are they looking to lead? Are they looking only to follow? Are they flexible and open to either, do they have a specific capital preference, whether it's grant, whether it's debt, whether it's safes, whether it's convertibles, whether it's equity, whether it's revenue share, capital structures? What is their preferred ticket size? Different investors are participate in different sweet spots. And so I think it's really important to understand that. What stage of business do they prefer? So some investors sort of have revenue milestones as how they judge stage of business. Some investors go by profitability. Other investors are just looking at key milestones. So really understanding how they define stage and then what their preference is. And then this one is, I'm sure Carl will echo, but is the cash available? You don't want to build an investing relationship and at the end of the day, you realize that the person is actually still raising their fund and they won't be able to disperse for another 12 months. So you just want to understand that, so you plan accordingly. And then you want to figure out, are there any knockout criteria that just automatically would disqualify you, even if there was perfect alignment? So is there geography preference? Is there structure preference? And I think these are just really important because they seem super simple, but then because you're excited and you move so quickly through developing the relationship, you forget, and then it sort of comes back to hurt you. And then understanding things like what their due diligence process is like, how active they are once you close a deal. It's great to understand past investments and where possible to even talk to them. So you really learn sort of the bottlenecks through the DD process from the investor and entrepreneur side. And then as well, you understand the things that the investor loves and does not like. So that wraps up the attract piece of my ABCs. Let's dive into the build section of fundraising. So this is really where I think I'll spend the most time, because I think this is where I got it wrong just so often over the past, I guess now 6 years of running Moringa Connect. You really want to build a relationship. It's not a transaction. And so I think it's really important to start following your investors' work, sending them a note if they accomplish something cool, start following some of their portfolio, especially those that align with you. Getting the investors' approval to add them to maybe a monthly product marketing message that goes out to your customers, or even better, a quarterly investor update that you send so that they're following and understanding what's happening. There's a great quote out of the Y Combinator sort of school of thought that says investors invest in lines, not dots. And those updates become a great way to show the lines of traction and momentum that you're building. And then the third kind of high level way that I think it's just to reiterate is being able to leverage conferences and events for any in-person interactions once you actually have researched someone and have gotten an intro to someone. So much, I can't count the number of deals we've closed where we talked by email for 6 to 9 months, and then we in 2 months post an in-person interaction, we were able to actually wrap everything up and complete the investment. So that in-person touch, really seeing this as a relationship, not a transaction, is huge. And then just some general tips that I know I'm sharing because I've done them or failed to do them so often. It's actually doing your research ahead of time, staying on top of following up immediately, and I'll echo that again later. Ask, and I think this quote is actually pretty true. Ask for money, you get advice. Ask for advice, you'll get money. I think people want to feel a part of what you're building. So the more you treat them like a transaction or like a bank, the more they will be abrasive and unhelpful. The more you involve them in the process, the more they'll be excited to help beyond their money. And I think this is not always in your control as an entrepreneur, but I think the best time really is the best time to meet investors is when you're not raising, so when you don't need their capital. I think the power dynamics are a lot more sort of equal and fair at that point in time. And so understand that you won't raise money, and so be building relationships in advance of that, not when you need it. And I've messed up on this so many times. And then the last point is you're getting married ultimately to the investor or their firm and their organization. So be impressed by more than their capital. Next point on building the investor relationship and the fundraising process is something called the justifiable ask. I was introduced to the justifiable ask through the GSBI accelerator, and it's just it changed how I thought about the things to communicate to an investor and when you're actually ready to communicate anything to an investor. And so with that, here's a summary of the elements that I think are super important to take away. Understanding what is the narrative of this specific investment opportunity. So these high growth innovation plays, scaling, impact, delivery, and underserved need actually come from another really good resource from Duke, their case impact resource. But understanding what's the narrative of the capital you're raising, how does this get you to the next milestone? And then what are the specific use of funds? Modeling that out, thinking through that strategy is super key. And I've struggled to do this because you always feel like, no, you need to get to the number, you need to tell the person the amount of money you need. But I think the more you can communicate a clear narrative and a clear use of funds, the easier all the other bullet points will be. So from there, once you have that unlock, I think that's where you put it into your financial model and you figure out what the funding gap is, which is the amount of capital you need to raise. I always think that it's really, really essential to put additional buffers on the capital you need, factoring the reality that due diligence will most likely take longer than you expect. And you also probably spend the money faster than you expect. And so there are different rules of thumb. Some people say do 2 times the amount of money you really need. But I think it's case by case specific, and really just think through that specifically. And then the third element of a justifiable ask is really understanding the type of capital. Unfortunately, we will not have enough time for either Carl or I to share all the best use cases for each capital, but there's so many resources online, and I would encourage you to dive into them to really understand when should you use grants versus debt versus a safe versus a convertible versus equity versus crowdfunding. And then the fourth element of a justifiable ask is really crystallizing what the investor gets back. And this is not just in terms of capital. So thinking through the impact return as well as the financial return. And then, of course, thinking through sort of the timeline of that return. So whether it's the repayment of debt, or key milestones you're going to hit in terms of unlocking more impact in your business. And the fifth element being a deadline. I think it's super crucial to define a deadline, because it really catalyzes everyone. It sets a North Star. And then to use something that's been really helpful for us, which is a rolling close. So rather than say all the investors have to agree on everything before anyone disperses, to really say, here are the terms. Once you've gone through your due diligence and you reach a point of making a decision, let's sign the agreements from legal, and let's put your capital to work. This really helps you keep the business running without things getting bottlenecked. I think I'm have about 3 more minutes or so, I think, to hit my 20 minutes. And so I'll just quickly go through these outreach documents that I think are super helpful. And a lot of this came out of the Duke's Smart Impact Capital online courses. So feel free to dive into that. The Scales program provided it to Carl and I think about 2 years ago, and it was extremely helpful in addition to the things we learned from the GSBI Accelerator. So the things to make sure you've done before you reach out to investors. So the introductory email, the follow-up documents you're going to need is a 1-pager, a short deck, and a long deck. And each of these 3 elements just build on each other, but have the same content. So what's the problem, the solution, the market, the demand that you have, the business model, how that solution kind of fits into your entire supply chain, your competitive advantage, your team, traction and any highlights, your funding ask, the use of funds, and then a projection of your finances. And then the financial model tends to be sort of the Excel version of crystallizing some of these things. And typically, investors are not going to dive into your full financial model until pretty late into the due diligence process, but they will pretty early want to be able to see your income statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement. And this has been an area where I personally have gotten stuck so many times, where you're trying to reconcile historical financials, you're trying to create the forecast for the future, and you're trying to marry all of that. And so I think it's just really important to get that done before you engage investors. And the last crucial thing I think is important to do before you engage investors is really thinking through your data room. So this is whether it's an online folder, whether it's in Google Drive or HelpSpot or DocSend, that crystallizes more content for people to really dive into what they need to know and look through and assess in order to make a clear, confident decision about your investment opportunity. So I won't read through this list. I'll share the slides as I've mentioned, but you want to make sure that every piece of your business, there are documents that are showing your progress to date for all of them, and also your compliance with any external or regulatory body that's involved in your work. So really important to make sure that these elements are there. As I said, the key word here being before. This has been my mistake, multiple fundraising, multiple fundraisers under my belt now. And then the final C, this is actually where the fun begins. I'll sprint through my sort of lessons learned on how to close a deal. And my thought, I would make them fun by adding gifts wherever possible. First mistake that I've made when raising is that I failed to see that it was a full-time responsibility. And I failed to design work with my team and external stakeholders to actually enable me to dedicate the time needed. And so please do not, if you want to close in a streamlined way, please do not multitask fundraising. Sometimes you really can't avoid it, but I think it's good to have targeted time that you set aside with your team in order to do this well. Don't engage until you're prepared. I keep saying it because it's an absolute a key area of growth for me. And I think that the worst thing you can do is bottleneck people's excitement in your investment opportunity by not having a complete data room or having your outreach documents up to date. And so just highly want to encourage anyone listening to be better than I have been. The next kind of key tip is finding an internal champion. So I think this is it's really helpful to think through the lens of what are my investors' goals and who do they trust and see as credible. So sometimes you're in an organization, you need to figure out who is the decision maker in that fund and whose opinion do they respect. And you really want to build relationships with that internal champion and make sure you're communicating your deal in line with the investor's personal or their organization's goals. This is another huge pitfall for me over the years that I want to encourage others not to repeat, which is to be on top of follow-up, to follow up immediately. So if you're prepared, you can follow up immediately. If you're not prepared, then you need to tweak the deck. You need to write the thing, check the financial model before you send it out. So I just strongly want to encourage seeing one of the fruits of being prepared being the ability to follow up immediately. And then I think it's super important to really see your investor beyond their capital. And in my closing sort of tips, I want to echo it again. Are they aligned with the values you have? Are they aligned with the strategy that you're thinking? Is there a sort of chemistry? Not that your investor is going to be your best friend, but do they inspire you? Do they challenge you? Are they really ready to help support you? And the next tip is try to get a decision as early as possible. So it's in everyone's interest not to waste time. And I think that it's important for the investor to say yes or no, and also for you to say yes or no as early in the process as possible. And this is maybe the best tool in the toolkit for an entrepreneur, which is to create FOMO, the fear of missing out. No one wants to be left out of a good opportunity. And I think it's important as investors go through due diligence for you to share traction that you're unlocking while they're doing due diligence, and as well as commitments you're getting so that it catalyzes everyone. So we're all energized towards the same end goal. I think this is on the personal mental health perspective. Fundraising can be grueling, and I think it's really, really key to keep your sanity. So for our team, we made a getting paid playlist where people just put a bunch of things. So I do not approve of all of the songs on this playlist, but everyone just kind of added their own personality to it, and we would just play that to either celebrate or to express our frustration when something worked out or did not work out. I think it's just really good to care for yourself in this process, and because you are way more important than getting that email out at 12:15 a.m. And then I believe this is my final tip, which is that the deal, the investment is not real until money is in the bank. We've gone through multiple scenarios where we've actually gotten a term sheet and signed agreements, and only for something to happen where the investor ultimately pulls out. And so just make sure that you don't celebrate too prematurely. And then continuing with that celebration theme, this is my final tip. Celebrate, but don't lose focus. My GIF isn't playing. It shows a runner who started celebrating just before the finish line, only to be passed by someone else. I just think that it's super important that you see in closing capital as something that you should be grateful for, something you should be excited for, but is not equal to success. Success is really the traction that you create with that capital. I've confused this over the years, and I know so many others who have, and so I just want to encourage anyone who's thinking about their next raise not to do the same. Thank you so much for your time and for listening in. With this, I am all set, and I'll pass the baton over to Carl, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Kwame. Hi, Carl.
Hello, everybody. Kwame, you are one tough act to follow. Sorry, I think we should just end it. I don't have anything else.
Nice.
No, that was great and extremely structured. To those here in attendance, I'm in Zambia. It's great to have some time with you. Kwame was extremely structured and said 90% of what I was planning to say. However, I'm just going to keep it to a few maybe additions, value adds to the main points that he hit on, and mostly drawing from our experience in a way that I hope is useful. So, hopefully now you can see my screen as well. And because Kwame added a little bit of a personal touch, I decided to go ahead and do the same while he was talking. Sorry, Kwame, if I wasn't fully engaged. But I'm a farmer and I come from a farm background. There's a gentleman on the back of this harvester. This is in Northern Idaho in overalls there. That's my great-grandfather, Sam Jensen. That goes on to the next generation. As you can see, the technology evolve. This is my grandfather, Ken Jensen, seated on the ground. My dad is this young toddler standing next to him. And then to the next generation, which would be my brother on the left and myself in those slick shades on the right. Everything that I've kind of learned about business has been on the go, which is why it's such a pleasure to talk to you, because I really learned a lot from listening to other learn by doers over the last several years and trying to avoid mistakes where possible, although we definitely had our fair share as well. Good Nature Agro, the company that I started with a couple of friends, Sunday Sulungwe and Kellen Hayes, is a seed company. And basically all of agriculture runs off of a pretty simple cycle. You start with a seed, plant it, nurture it, and you end up with more copies of the same. So these copies can either be planted again for more use, multiplication, further growth, or they can go into their end use, which is food, industry, etc. We do this model not in a consolidated way like my family does in North Idaho, but in a disaggregated model with about 4,400 seed growers. So we follow that path where what these farmers in our network grow goes to other farmers, about 112,000 farmers in 2019, to be planted for their own growth, their own consumption, their own use. And every one of these farmers, very similar to Kwame's model, supported with training, financial access, and good nature as an end market. Our mission is to work with these smallholder farmers to move out of poverty and firmly into the middle class. And we have some traction doing that. When we started, our farmers were averaging $113 a hectare, and this past year they hit $357. So a tripling of that net income, but our longer term goal is $600 net income per hectare. And the reason that we chose this number, this is our North Star kind of at the intersection of business and impact, like Kwame was talking about, is that as we hit the 600 number, farmers are able to achieve their longer term goals. So their 5-year goals, their middle class goals, sending a kid to college, starting a business, building a house. But it's also good for the business because as farmers approach this number, they're becoming more efficient. We're getting more inventory, more seed for every dollar that we're investing, and good nature is becoming marginally more profitable. This is Anis Tembo. She's one of our private extension agents, which is a grassroots field officer for Good Nature. She's standing next to a new house she built with her proceeds from 2018. Behind her is her old house. So moving from thatch to iron sheets, moving from no bedrooms to 2, all of these are the kind of steps that we want to see. And Ennis was extremely successful, making over $1,500 from 2 crops. That was a video, but we'll skip that. But as an extension agent, she also has the responsibility to engage with 39 of her fellow farmers. So along with her income from that work, herself and the 40 farmers produced about $46,000 in sales, and she gets a revenue share on that, which equates to $935 a year, or over $2,500 in G&A income in 2019. Now, I've told this story for years, and I hope that gives a good initial background on our company. But what it took me way too long to understand was that even though that's why we're here, that's not necessarily why investors are here. So this quote, "I understand what you're doing here," came immediately after I'd basically made a very extended, drawn out version of that same pitch. With the follow-up question, "But what am I doing here?" And this came from an investor who was looking at putting in for a convertible note. They're also in it for the impact. We're extremely aligned. Like Kwame was saying, you have to have that alignment first, but they also need to understand what the return is going to be for them and why they're putting money into the business, as opposed to just giving advice and kind of hanging in there with you. So one thing that I'll start to move into is sort of hitting these points and then giving examples. Always remember that the value you're creating for an investor is their value. They want to see your value as well and make sure that your business is healthy and it's going to be running successfully. But when you're communicating value, you need to speak to how their backers get paid. And that's always in the eye of the beholder. So it's very true that there's a spectrum of impact and returns, and the longer you present what you're doing to more people, the more discussions you have, the easier it becomes to determine where a potential investor fits on this spectrum at an earlier stage. But you have to keep this in mind at all times, that some people are really going to want to lean into the impact story. That is their value. And others are going to really draw their decision from the financial considerations only. Most people are somewhere almost exactly in the middle. And then this idea that you're going to be creating value for an investor is based on the fact that you're creating value for other stakeholders. And so what we'll go into next after the final bullet is kind of how we've started to build that out and show where we're positioned on a value chain, so that it becomes clear to the investors that we've thought through how all these players on the chain are making money, not just ourselves and not just them, because neither ourselves or them will get there without understanding how all the pieces fit together. And then last on this point, the value you're creating has to be appropriate to the ask. So debt investors want margin at a low risk, while equity investors want to see the growth plans, the value pillars, and how you're differentiating yourself from competitors. So you have to keep in mind the vehicle that they're using as a factor on what value they're looking to build. So this example of kind of how Good Natured started positioning ourselves on the value chain, how we create values for other people that are involved, other stakeholders, was really created in order to give clarity to how we create value for an equity investor. And so we start by laying out the whole chain. We're a seed company, so we're all the way down here at input companies. And that was part of the challenge that we were facing, was people really saw us as a brick and mortar business. You produce a product, you sell it to farmers, that's the end of your piece. So we started to pull in comparatives. So there are all these other players, Monsanto, Syngenta, Pioneer, that are also in the space. Those comparatives need to be put out there first. You'll have your own versions of who those are, but one of the first things that an investor is going to ask is, how are you going to outcompete the big guy? Because most social enterprises are coming in at a relatively small stage. And so we approach that head on. We're selling a different product. Plus, these guys truly are brick and mortar. They're focused on that one step only. Some cases with our direct competitors, they have an intermediary with the government, but Good Nature focuses on this larger chain. And then in an extended pitch or a conversation with an investor, I'd go on to break down how we're adding value to each of these different players, not just farmers, but also traders and also food companies. To the next point, and kind of building off the last one, to engage, you have to be able to speak multiple languages. Just like every investor has a unique position on the impact returns spectrum, they, like every one of us, like entrepreneurs, like everybody, thinks in different ways. So some people will understand your model through unit economics. Some people will understand it best through the experience of your user. Some people will get it through macro situational. You have to be able to tell the exact same story through multiple tools. And each of these gain strength when you have comparables. This is really valuable as well when you start to get deeper into diligence and you start to dig into the details. If you don't know your space well and you don't know the user experience that you're providing versus your nearest comparables, or the unit economics versus your nearest comparables, you're going to regret it, because you won't be able to show why they should invest in you and not someone else. And then each of these gains strength when you can demonstrate exceptionalism, especially with external validation. So I'll give some examples of that. This is a way that we've started to talk about the user experience of what Good Nature does. And it is really focused on what are the real questions that farmers have? What am I going to grow this year? Who am I going to sell to? Where am I going to get the seed and other inputs? How will I pay for it? And how do I get a good yield? Some investors really get this and appreciate that our whole operational model is built on these major questions that farmers have to face. Others won't. So you show the comparables on this one. If it doesn't work for that investor, move on. Some people like to see the different pieces broken out. These are the different components with some major numbers and milestones attached to them. Other people will like to see a focus on the validation. So that user experience that was in the previous slide is now here presented from Acumen and 60 Decibel study, saying, our farmers themselves are reporting that they're seeing significant improvements in their life, that they're seeing Good Nature as an exceptional partner, that our net promoter score is extremely high. And this may be the thing that tips an investor over the edge. So it's really about telling the same story in multiple ways. Financials are, of course, a major component of that, and you have to be very conversant with your margins, what you're trying to accomplish. Anything that stands out as an anomaly, being able to talk to that, which we'll get to in the next kind of headline point that I'm talking about. And then coming back to the macro. So this is an external study from KPMG. Again, some people really like a KPMG-like validation. And so if someone like that is saying, okay, the input companies are receiving the greatest returns on EBITDA, that is probably a good indicator. Next point is to hang a lantern on your problems. This is an old political axiom from the States. But what we mean by that is, if there's something that is a big red flag, or is going to be a red flag, something that's either in your operations, your business, or is going on in a macroeconomic situation that's out of your control, the investor is going to see that, especially in debt, where the vision of your company matters less than the potential hangups on a short time frame. So it's better to highlight these challenges yourself, shine some light on it, hence the hang a lantern advice. And always have a plan, even if this is something that's just come up, have a plan for how to resolve that, including timelines and personnel. And then where again, Kwame was really hitting that point that you have to like working with your investors. You have to like what they bring to the table beyond money. This is really the fun part of business in a lot of ways, because you're facing something that you don't know how to answer legitimately. You've tried. Your results, your numbers have told you that to some extent you've come up lacking. You've hit a loss here. Your margin's not where it needs to be. You can't figure out how to reach into this new market. And that's what makes it fun, is getting more brains around the table, and the right investors will help you in these situations, help you reduce the risk or improve the results. So this is one of our major problems right now. This is a chart showing the dollar against the Zambian kwacha. And it really hurt us badly last year when there was a major depreciation of the kwacha, because a lot of our sales are in that currency, while all of our financing is in dollars. And yet, I think it has actually helped Good Nature, and I think it's helped myself as an entrepreneur to confront this head on with a lot of our investors. Because not only did it help us finally face this massive problem that you can see has been building for multiple years, but it also put us in a situation where some of our investors, especially debt investors, could see that we were prioritizing this, digging into it, trying to find creative solutions, looking at currency swaps, all these things that I, a farmer, had never heard of in my life. And it gave them confidence to want to continue and to grow with the company. So rather than kind of hiding it as something that doesn't look that great, it hurt our numbers, it's a lot better and a lot more fun to confront it together. Next headline, elephants are eaten one bite at a time. What I mean by this is, as the company gets bigger, the core model's probably not going to change, hopefully not going to change, but there are going to be new components of it. And so you have to practice selling it in pieces. If you don't have to talk about the pieces, or if people aren't interested, then you don't need to go there. If the core model's enough, if the foundational economics are enough, if your track record's enough, that's great. But you always need to have it in the background. Kwame talked about a lot of things that you should have in your back pocket, and making sure that you're not going out and selling yourself or your company until you're really there. I think once you start to build your team around smaller pieces of what you're doing, you need to work with them to be able to tell that story. Not only the entrepreneur or the CEO needs to be able to sell it, but also the people leading these respective programs. And again, you have to be able to speak to these smaller pieces with user experience, unit economics, macro view, using those multiple languages to tell the same story. And how they fit together. So these are some examples that we've started creating, where these are actually from marketing materials, but moving to a really small piece of our business, which is trying to improve our logistics and get closer to the farmer on delivery and pickup, and link more of our customers to market. This isn't something that I would enter into unless it really grabbed the attention of an investor. But myself and the person running the program should be able to get into the details. This is how it works technologically. This is our main partner, Musanga. These are the kind of bullet point steps. And you have to be able to show that. So here's another one that's related to crop insurance. Here's another kind of marketing capture, focusing on how we're working with Finca. And again, this one's very user oriented. This is a quote from a farmer. And that stands out for a lot of people as what they want to see. But you have to have the unit economics and the reasoning behind it in order to make it meaningful. Next piece of kind of practical advice is everything will be a game of telephone. So the biggest consideration should still be able to fit on one slide. I'll show you one in a minute. That is our takeaway. This is how we're going to spend our Series A money slide. You will not be pitching to investment committees. So I don't know what stage different people listening are at, but you have to keep this in mind regardless. The final decision for almost every investment that could come to your company is going to be made by someone that you'll never meet. So you'll be working with someone from the investment group, an advisor, maybe a program manager, but you're not going to be the one ultimately pitching your company. So the person you're negotiating with, negotiating on interest rates, negotiating on valuations, some of these negotiations can get tough and you have a lot of back and forth, but they're going to be your advocate at the end of the day. So you have to protect your interest, but the main thing is to build a relationship, make sure that they get it and understand your company and can communicate in a way that maintains what you feel is really valuable about what you're trying to accomplish. And once you submit something to your due diligence folder or communicate it to this investor, keep in mind that it's not done. So where Kwame was talking about the fact that fundraising is a full-time job, this is a big part of it. Is you might upload your cash flow, but that cash flow needs to be updated. Most of what you're sharing with investors is a living doc. And one of the things that turns people off pretty quickly is if they see that these documents that are meant to be living for the health of your business are not really doing it. They don't want you to create things generally just for them. They want to see things that are helping you improve, be more efficient, focus more on what makes your business tick, and then acting on it. So this is the one-page slide on how we're looking to spend our Series A. It's a lot. I mean, it's 18 months of spending and CapEx and growth and building out our team, but these are the major points. And so these kind of things need to be in hand so that you remain on the same page as your investors, even through this game of, or this process of multiple stages, and them and ultimately being the ones to present and make the case and bring in the investment. Some trends, just to wrap up, I think, because Kwame gave that great structure, I think what we're seeing is that investors are increasingly looking for synergies in their portfolio. So understanding their portfolio becomes more and more important. I personally feel that there's a lot more room for social enterprises that share the same values to start engaging more in operations. So this aligns well with what we're trying to do, which is have those operational overlaps. And investors love to see that as well. It just kind of helps validate that you're working with the right companies, and it can make for all kinds of interesting collaborations. Investors are increasingly specializing and segmenting. Impact investing is not as young as it used to be. So where Ag DevCo used to be the only kind of ag investor, now there are many different players. There are people interested in investing only at the intersection of agriculture and climate change, only at the intersection of agriculture and wildlife conservation, only at the intersection of agriculture and digital finance. All of these pieces are getting smaller, more specific. Investment teams are hiring more experts that will be more in tune with what you do, and this can be a great strength. Because again, getting the right investor on board adds more than money. And then third, the gaps are getting more attention, but don't hold your breath. And this was really included because, again, I don't know the stage. Hopefully there are some enterprises on here, but the gaps that we faced when we were starting out, specifically around the friends and family space, this is an area that for a lot of local entrepreneurs is just unassailable. And as someone coming in from the US, it was something I had a little more access to solve. Now we're starting to see groups that are tackling these really difficult investment segments, trying to promote that inclusivity, trying to really push local entrepreneurs, which is fantastic. But all of these things take more time than you think. So anyone that's kind of interested in this space, I'd love to connect you to some groups that are trying and gonna need a little bit more time to get there. And then the last thing I really want to leave on is this idea to never change who you are and what you're trying to do for money. So it's really tempting, especially when the business is starting out, you're not that stable, you're not that profitable, to take on a new project, expand to a new area. All kinds of things can lead you to something new in order to get it, especially a grant, but sometimes other types of investment in the door, and you'll always regret it. You know what you're doing, it's your business, and the financing and the financial model need to service that, not the other way around. That's it for me. So thank you for listening, and I'll turn it back over to Sayuri.
Great presentations. We are actually at 10 o'clock, so very little time for Q&A. What I would encourage everybody to do who are not going to get their question answered is to go to the LinkedIn SEAG group and post your question there, and I'll forward them to Carl and Kwame to get those answered. In the meantime, I'm going to just pick 2 questions from the list and pose them to Carl and Kwame. The first question is, how many rounds of fundraising did you do? What's the difference between each of those rounds and types? Carl, you want to go first?
Yeah, definitely. So we started out with founder funding as well as a couple of grants, and that was a really good position to start in. We didn't have a lot of money, so we were extremely lean. We then moved into a space where we were combining essentially grants and friends and family for debt functions. Moving from that into a space where we were really hitting the major choke point of our model financially, which is working capital to buy crop from farmers. And then at the same time, starting to bring on through a SEAG who were focused on the long-term value of the company because they wanted to eventually move into a space where their debt would be converting to shares. And now we're doing a Series A. I think the major difference in terms of our experience was that at the beginning, it was just extremely story-driven, and it was all based on what we were doing for farmers. It was all impact-based. We didn't have a lot of traction. We didn't have a great understanding of what our unit economics were or where we were planning to make small tweaks. It was just all about kind of, you know, we want to work with farmers. We want to get out there and help increase their incomes. But as we started moving to different types of financing, debt and convertible notes, and now heading into Series A, you really need to be keeping the business as your driver and the impact as the result or the outcome. So that was the hardest part. As much as there are a lot of skills in between that you learn, the hard part for us as entrepreneurs was making that shift in thinking and to some extent in priorities of time, even if the priority remains to work with farmers long term. Kwame, what do you think?
Kwame? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Carl said it really well. For us, we did the same thing. We started with grants out of scale-ups and other business plan competitions like MIT Ideas, then moved actually to crowdfunding. So I think that's the only difference between our 2 companies. We did Kiva and Indiegogo. So Indiegogo being free donations, Kiva being crowdfunded debt. Then we moved from crowdfunding to friends and family debt, similar to Carl, and migrate from friends and family debt to then angel investor debt, so high net worth individuals, and then move from there to more institutional debt lenders, and then as well to VC and angel investors who were putting capital into convertible notes. So we're actually currently just wrapping up a convertible note round, and our goal is to then do a Series A by the end of the year.
Hey, I was gonna try to do 2 questions, but I see that we're really out of time. So sorry about not being able to get all the questions in.
Oh, no.
But please do feel free to engage with us through LinkedIn, and I will get them answered. Thank you so much, Kwame and Carl. You guys are awesome. And thanks for everybody that stayed with us for the webinar. And let's keep staying engaged. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.